Welcome, Reanimated fans, to the 42nd episode of Reanimated, the podcast about all things undead and zombie. My name is Stuart Tiffin. I'm one of your hosts. I'm hailing from the Pacific Standard Time Zone, and joining me from the Eastern side of things is my indomitable co-host, H.A. Conrad. How's it going today?
It's going really well. I'm enjoying a Raging Bitch Belgian-style IPA at this moment. So things are not too shabby.
Flying Dog, I think, is one of the probably in my top 5 breweries in the United States.
I really like it. My friend Derek turned me onto this, and he stores his beer in our fridge, and I steal them every once in a while.
Fantastic. I myself am having a Kraken black spiced rum and Pepsi because 2 drinks made out of pure sugar and corn syrup cannot be bad for you.
I'm going to take mine over yours, but it does sound delicious.
It's fine for now. We work with what we've got. It's the zombie survival credo.
Indeed.
Anyway, now that we've gotten out of the way the fact that we podcast inebriated, we should take a moment to thank our sponsor, Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes it easy to create your own website. We use it. We think you should use it. And if you wanted to, you could employ the promotional code ZOMBIE, it's not case sensitive, in order to get a discount if you decide to use Squarespace to host your stuff.
They give you a nice little 10% discount. Go ahead, use it. Use it well, zombie fans. Stuart, we have some Zed-related events to get into, so do you want to start?
Kick it off, H.A.
Break it down. So this weekend, there was a lot of zombie things going on. Oddly enough, where there are gatherings, there are zombies. So there's been a few different things. In Oregon, there was this basically like a Hillsborough Hops zombie night. So people could basically get dressed up, go to the ball game dressed as zombies. It was very exciting. And here in New York, Coney Island had a little bit of a zombie takeover. So people basically walked along the streets, dressed up in their favorite zombie makeup. Then they were able to go to a nice little baseball game, and they even sectioned off part of the stadium to see the Brooklyn Cyclones. So those dressed as zombie had their own section, apparently. I sadly missed this because I was not in town this weekend, but it looks, actually some people went all out in terms of the makeup.
There are some really nice portraits from Reuters. I'm sure that was a fun assignment for the Reuters photographer.
I know. And as part of the July 4th tradition, there is the hot dog eating contest at Nathan's. And in lieu of that, since this was the day before, they did a brain bash at the beach. And so it was an eating competition. I am glad I was not there for this, but they were eating deep fried calf brains.
Gross.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
anyway,
I'm sure there was a couple of heaved stomachs after that. Yeah. Jesus. Okay. Moving on.
Moving on. In other news, GameSpot had a little bit of an article with new gameplay footage from H1N1, and it's a pretty lengthy walkthrough. Have you tried this out at all or looked at it at all, Stuart?
And actually, yeah, I saw this new gameplay. Basically, what this is showing you is the crafting system, where you take an axe, you cut down a tree. From that, you get some wood. From that, you can make wooden sticks, and from wooden sticks and your T-shirt, which you can tear apart, you can make a bow. And then with that, you could shoot zombies. And I guess the guy was saying, the game designer, he's like, look, you're going to start off basically with jeans and a T-shirt. And is there anything else? Is there any kind of weapon? I don't know if there was.
No, there's no weapon. It's just...
Yeah, so even having that axe was a step up. So consider this game to probably start off with a really kind of a steep difficulty rating. But then, once you start getting into the crafting, you can make everything you need to survive and find vehicles that you can repair and probably weapons. And this continues to pique my interest. We'll have to see as it develops.
It looks like, I mean, from a difficulty level, from my perspective, I would have to spend an enormous amount of time to even get to a point where I could do anything fun in this game.
Well, it depends on what you consider fun. Like that one platform he plops down.
Yeah, that was
he
cool.
said, yeah, these are all, every plank in this platform has to be accounted for by chopping down trees. It was big. Like that would be, he didn't get that many planks when he cut down that tree. So I'm assuming you'd have to spend like a couple of hours cutting down trees in a zombie infested wasteland. Is that fun for you? You be the judge.
I think it would be kind of fun for me. And in terms of zombie shows and TV series, Z Nation has started filming in Spokane, Washington this summer. And so there's an article about that and a little bit of just a peek at some of the makeup, which actually looks pretty cool. I'm not sure what to think about this, given that it's the producers of Sharknado, but I'll give sci-fi a chance. It could be interesting.
And as we talked about last week, the cast so far and that has
Looks
been announced
good.
is great. Yeah, I'm psyched for this. I'm not gonna lie. Even if it is kind of like, the thing is, the more shows that we have like this, the faster I think the audience might get burned out, and we might see an end of like prime time zombie TV content. And I guess everything has its time and place, and it might come to an end. However, I'm gonna hope for the best, and that this will be something that will actually just propel the genre along, and we'll see more and more excellent zombie content from it.
I hope so. I hope you're right. I hope it's like a very cool show. I'm a little bit jealous of the Spokane natives who get to be extras in this. In Virginia, there is a Zombie Survival 101 and a really semi-disturbing article where the people talk about how it's not PC to shoot humans or animals anymore, and shooting rubber rings is boring. So what else do you shoot? Zombies. And so this is a Zombie Survival 101 Surviving the Horde class, and it's a class offered by a Virginia firearms training company. So this is what they came up with. I guess it would be fun. Did you read this at all, Stuart?
I've skimmed over it, but honestly, the premise that you just described, I feel like the video game first person shooter industry has been capitalizing on the fact that it's a little bit ambiguous, morally speaking, to shoot people in a video game, but to shoot zombies and to shoot Nazis is totally okay, and we've been doing that for decades. So honestly, this is just a continuation of that proud tradition.
I guess with live ammo, but
with live ammo.
In any case, I just thought it was a very odd article, but okay, all good. So, would you ever do something like this?
Absolutely. If this was available near me, I would absolutely take part. Shooting is super cathartic. As long as you do it safely, you have rules about how you conduct yourself on a range, but this could be awesome fun.
I do like how one of the participants does say that they were more concerned about Terminators than zombies.
Well, that makes a lot more sense, frankly.
Because he's concerned about a possible robot uprising, and Terminators are really, really hard to kill.
The man makes a lot of sense. What can you say?
Anyway, and you had a couple of things you added in.
Yeah, so one of the articles that I've added in, and it'll be in the show notes, is from Ward's Auto, which is mostly about the global auto industry, and in this case, advertising. And we've talked in the past about how Hyundai, I'm never really sure how to pronounce that car name, has had kind of the corner on The Walking Dead, and has had a really kind of omnipresent marketing effort surrounding that show and surrounding zombies because of that show. And so this article goes into the kind of the behind the scenes a little bit, where this is a Korean car company, and the article talks about how the American representative for Hyundai's marketing had to go to his Korean bosses and be like, so there's this zombie show, and I think we should have one of our cars in it. And they, for whatever reason, luckily had the foresight to be like, yeah, go ahead. And so then they had their Hyundai Tucson, that lime green car that we've seen in both the seasons that we've reviewed so far. It's a fairly, actually it only shows up in the second season. That's right, because they find it in the big traffic jam. So it was in the second season, and it has a couple more seasons of appearances in it ahead of it. And then they've had a lot of like social media stuff. They've had that competition to like design the zombie survival car, which you and I have talked about on this podcast, HA.
Yes, we have.
And so they kind of just talk about how they didn't expect the zombie thing, as they call it, to last as long as it did, but they're just kind of riding the wave. And then I love that this article, or one of the articles that I read on the way to getting to this eventual one, is like, spoiler alert, the Hyundai does not make it past season 4. Not because it gets destroyed, but because they leave it behind. But honestly, one of the most interesting things about this article to me is at the end, where they talk about how the automaker had product placement restrictions on the show. For example, you can't destroy the car in a scene of sheer mayhem. You cannot have carnal behavior inside the car.
Really?
Yeah. So,
I'm surprised they wouldn't want to market the heck out of that.
I know. Or, I can understand why they wouldn't want it to get torn apart by, like, a horde or crashed, and, like, destroyed. But
yeah, but like carnal behavior, that's one of the cornerstones of owning a car.
Getting laid in a car sells a lot of cars, right?
It does. And, especially to the market, which I would imagine would be teenagers and college students.
Maybe this is like a Korean cultural decision, and that's considered like crass. Well, we Americans, sex sells. Either way, so I thought that was interesting. And when I saw that like you cannot have this basically, that might explain why the Hyundai made it so far, is because they couldn't destroy it in the plot. And so I'd be like, well, I'd get that out of the script,
Yeah. Anyway. This was cool. I feel like Hyundai also has sponsorships with some other shows that are a little bit like sci-fi shows too. So I think they've taken this further than Walking Dead.
Well, more power to them if they are. I mean, they're talking about how many hits they're getting on their website because they launched that an app that basically let you create the zombie survival car, and that was just driving traffic to the like Hyundai.com or whatever. And so this whole project has just totally raised their profile. I'm sure that whoever came up with this idea to put the car in the show has gotten a couple of promotions.
Yeah, and they deserve them too.
Also in Walking Dead news, we had because of Dead, White, and Blue, which was over the 4th of July weekend, and the resulting Talking Dead or Chris Hardwick special looking ahead to season 5, they had there's a new teaser trailer has come out ahead of season 5, and it was like 15 seconds long as far as I can tell. It was really freaking short.
It was very short and pretty much just involves, well, the common theme. If you have to watch a kid, that's dangerous.
Yeah, and it doesn't tell us anything, really. It's just like, what have Carol and Tyrese and Judith been doing while everybody else was getting locked up in a train, running away from zombies?
Hiding.
So, yeah, I mean, granted, it still wets my whistle a little bit, but, it doesn't really tell us anything new.
I admit when they kept talking about the trailer, I was like, come on, give it. I hope it's more than like 10 seconds. Oh, well.
Yeah, well, October's not too far away, and there's plenty more that we can talk about in the meantime.
Yes, like In the Flesh, season 2.
Oh my God, what a good segue.
That was pretty awesome of me. I admit it.
Pat yourself on the back. Take a minute and pat yourself on the back.
I'm going to take a sip of my beer instead.
Yeah. I'm running out of rum and coke. All right, but pressing on right ahead. Episode 4, Season 2, or Series 2 if you want to get all British with it, In the Flesh. kind of a kick-ass episode.
Kind of. It was awesome.
Kind of. And it's not like shit was exploding. Usually that's one of my, criteria for kick-ass. This show is well written, and it just continues to be kind of awesome in that respect.
It's well written, and some of my concerns about the plot kind of going a little bit, like trying to introduce too much and do too much with it. It was my fears were laid to rest with this episode. There was a lot of interesting storylines and character interactions and things that happened within this episode that just progressed it really far, and it was very well done. So
do you want to just step through it? Because I feel like there was enough going on. Another one of these action-packed episodes kind of takes place over the course of one Sunday in Rorton. But there's enough going on that we kind of have to step through chronologically. So,
I feel in a lot of ways that this is the Philip episode.
Yeah, definitely.
So, and it opens with Philip having.
I would agree that it opens with Philip, and it seems like the Philip episode until it becomes the Kieren episode. I just like to throw that in there.
They throw a little switcheroo in, true, but there's a lot of Philip going on here.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of these shows that you kind of have these characters that you're not feeling. I mean, Phil's been there. He's been a little bit of comic relief. He's been representing this part of Rorton that's torn, that's trying to fit in with the human population, but also has some sympathies with the PDS sufferers. I mean, I think that this episode, there is a point where he has to choose a side, and he does it very well.
Yeah, but it's almost like he's not picking a PDS or a human side. He's picking the side of morals, to me.
Well, right, but that's also a choice, too.
Yeah.
So, but in any case, the episode opens up with Philip having a fantasy about Amy.
Which is hilarious in every way. His bedroom is hilarious. Every part about his bedroom. And he's got a tiny little bed, and there's a tank model next to it, and I couldn't even catch the other details, but I feel like as a set, his bedroom is very well designed.
I felt like somebody had a lot of fun putting together Philip's bedroom.
Yeah. And so he's in his tiny bed consciously trying to have a sensual dream about Amy.
And, she's not even talking like Amy talks, and some of the very British, though. Oh, Philip, you're so adept. You're
so adept at the sensual arts. It's very laughable.
But awesome. I feel like they must have been laughing their heads off trying to do this seriously and not crack up.
Yeah.
But in any case, that doesn't work out so well because his mom interrupts, and then it segues into Amy. And this is kind of an interesting part of the episode. Amy is sort of wandering around a kitchen in the morning looking for what it seems like breakfast, and it's kind of weird because she grabs some sort of breakfast,
like a granola bar. Yeah. And it's like she's looking through cabinets that are all empty because nobody eats in this house, including
her. And it's like a weird moment because she eats the granola bar and then she spits it out because she's like, what am I doing? So it's almost like she had forgotten that she doesn't eat. So it's kind of weird stuff, more behavioral, strange stuff going on with Amy.
Which is, it continues this kind of trend through this season where people who are taking the meds seem to be coming back to life, basically. Like they're experiencing pain. She either had hunger or at least felt the psychological, habitual necessity to eat.
Right.
And so, I don't know, are all the Risen going to come back to life? That would be, kind of an anticlimactic end of the show, but it could happen.
Yeah.
And from there, goddamn, we go to this. Were you not incensed by this meeting? Like the thing I felt watching this next scene where what's this blonde guy's name? Dean or something?
Dean, yeah.
Yeah. So he has in the past on this show been portrayed as fairly sympathetic, like because he's a diabetic and he got locked in the cage. And and he's not a total asshole, and he seems to be down on his luck a lot. Like, he needs money, which is basically why he has this job now. But he's part of the new system, the new basically like quasi-military force that keeps the PDS people in line, and he's doing a seminar.
Right. And he's basically giving them marks off if their makeup isn't on right. And like this poor old woman that's role playing with him is just all she wants to go and do is like garden, the poor woman, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, he's the one in charge. It's very much, I think, a commentary on bureaucracy and useless things.
Well, he's teaching them like pre-canned phrases to say to people if they shake hands and people are offended that their hands are cold. Like, it's super offensive, basically.
It's absolutely offensive.
I mean, I don't know. Shaking hands with a zombie way. It's already kind of weird, but yeah.
And then there's the piece that I was like, you know, they're all like there and they have to basically check in and show that they attended, and they get stamps on these like horrible things, and this is like one stamp on a card of many, and then there's 5 different colored cards. So it basically just feels like this uphill battle. Like there's not ever going to be an end to the things that they put in place that they're supposed to do. It's very much purgatory.
Yeah, it feels that way. And when Kieren asks, like, what happens when you have all the stamps? And Dean's like, well, then you've got all the stamps. And then he says, oh, but if you have all 5 cards, then there's an away day and we get to go to the beach. I'm just thinking, like, a bunch of zombies at the beach is, yeah, pretty hilarious, just also as a concept. But however, so that scene thankfully comes to an end. And we see Kieren continuing to, in that scene, Kieren is continuing to just kind of like, he's asking questions, but, and he seems dissatisfied with the answers he's getting. He seems dissatisfied with the treatment that he's getting, but he's not really raising any fuss. He's just going along with it. And the next place he goes is to Simon and Amy's house, where Simon is kind of holding court with the other unmakeupped PDS folk in town.
Yeah, and the stuff he's saying to them is super creepy and culty. You know, like basically he's encouraging them to tell their rising stories, and he sounds very much, well, he sounds like a cult leader. And Kieren is just scoffing at this.
And when they have a one-on-one, yeah, Kieran's like, your followers sound brainwashed, and Simon's like, well, who's really brainwashed here? Aren't you actually more brainwashed than they are? And you know what? To an extent, he's definitely got a point there.
I guess.
But Kieran's the one hiding behind the makeup and the contact lenses, and however, that conversation ends with Kieren being like, hey, you know what? You'd be okay, you know, in like a let's hook up kind of way if you were just more normal some of the time. And Simon apparently doesn't know how to be normal, and so it turns into a more of a sympathetic moment for Simon, in my opinion.
Right, it does. But it's still a little bit weird. I still question his motives for this romantic thing he has going on with Kieren. He seems very manipulative to me, and even, you know, they're like kissing and they're being very affectionate. I mean, he just feels like he turns a little bit too quickly to that. And it could be that he is very attractive to Kieren, but it just also feels really wrong about how he's going about this and not owning up to it to Amy.
Yeah.
And Kieran's really bothered by that too, because he's just like, we can't do this and have Amy find out by just seeing us like walk in on us kissing. That's just terrible. And then Simon's like, yeah, well, tell her soon, okay? Totally. It's like, dude, it's kind of your responsibility.
That's dickish. But I mean, it's both of their responsibilities at this point. Like, Kieren should not shirk at this responsibility either. Yeah, Simon is a dick for having let it get as far as he has, but at this point, it's both their problem.
I agree, but I guess that's my point, is that Simon is just sort of washing his hands and letting Kieren be the one to do the dirty work.
Yeah, for real. So Philip has, instead of going to a town hall meeting, has decided to go to his PDS hooker's house and falls asleep, and then he misses the meeting. At the meeting, they bring up the problem that there is this brothel in town And so they decide to make it a call to action, and Maxine uses that and seizes upon that to drive forward her agenda of basically, I don't know, like the end of all PDS people. It basically is her end result. I think what she's trying to get at.
Well, I mean, she wants to lock them up. She wants to dehumanize them.
If
And
not,
so,
just kill them. I have to think that she doesn't want them to exist. Period.
no, no. Um,
Double kill them. I don't know how you really refer to that. I mean, was Henry murdered, or was Henry put back to sleep? It's like I know that the show probably wants me to think of him as being murdered, but he is a zombie. I don't
yeah,
know.
but
The show makes you think.
it makes you think these deep thoughts. Deep thoughts by In the Flesh. Um, I don't know. That question, I think he definitely was murdered because he wasn't rabid.
Fair enough. So if Kieren was killed, he'd be murdered too.
Yep,
You heard it here, folks. Zombie murder is still murder.
it is.
And so also at that meeting, though, the town hall meeting, Henry's mom does get up and she's like, "What about my son? You guys are not doing anything about it." And she calls Maxine on her shit. She's like, "You've been lying ever since you got here. I don't want to talk to you. I'm talking to my people." And of course, her people totally ignore her. But she makes a scene. And so when Philip wakes up in the whorehouse and runs back to the town hall and the meeting's over, Maxine's like, "You missed this thing," and she's being a real problem. Henry's a problem. He's a distraction. We have to end this distraction. You have to go to his mom and tell her that there's new intelligence, that he's been seen in a camp. And Philip's like, "What's the source?" And Maxine's like, "I don't want to have this conversation with you." I don't know why she doesn't just lie. She could
I
easily
know.
just be like, "Oh, it's the CIA or MI6 or whatever the fuck." And Philip be like, "Oh, okay, I'm sure, like, don't you think?"
Yeah.
So
Do
yeah,
you,
this is kind of a little bit artificial that this
there's
issue even rises.
there's something weird about, not weird, but do you feel like the character of Maxine is a little too one-dimensional and evil?
Yes, and honestly, have you been reading anywhere else about this show?
No, I've tried to avoid it
Yeah,
because I didn't want to get spoiled.
uh,
Have you been?
I only a review of this episode. I read a review of this episode on Den of Geek, and they were also talking about how she is too evil and too mustache twirling, especially in this episode. And
That is actually.
they also kind of said that basically Bill Macy and Vicar Audie were kind of the weakest links in the last season too. And
Well,
if you think of it that way, honestly, that's kind of true.
well, it's true, but I think, and this is why to me it stands out a little bit more, especially about her character. And I agree with them if that's what they said about those characters. Um, I think one of the things that this show does really well is show a lot of different dimensions about different characters. So it just feels weird to me that the bad guys don't have more than one dimension.
That's yeah, like they're missing that George Martin thing where he manages to make the bad guys understandable at some point. And I mean, they're trying to hide. The thing is, like this weird mystery around Maxine Martin, other than we think maybe her child died. We just don't know enough about her to feel bad for her, in a way.
Right. She just is kind of this, I don't know, kind of this dictatorial character that you
And
don't really.
and now she's the more manipulative one. Even though Simon started off that way, now she is lying, and the audience knows she's lying. Whereas with Simon, we don't really know still if he's lying or not most of the time. So she's definitely taken over for Simon as being like the least trustworthy person on the show. And so yeah, and so Phillips is like, "You know what? If you're not going to tell me a source, I'm not going to do it." And she basically tells him to like think about it really hard for a while and come back later and they'll readdress the situation. But she also reveals to him that they know about the brothel, and that leads to some other shenanigans that aren't really necessary to the episode. Not to undermine the awesomeness of this episode, but like the Philip trying to find the footage bullshit isn't really
Yeah.
necessary.
It's a weird little segue. I don't think
Yeah.
they needed that.
Yeah. Other than showing that he's like willing to go to certain lengths to avoid detection. But it's, um, And then also in Simon's at Simon's like home where Amy lives, this is to me it reminded me of Fight Club, the scene where the blonde chick and the other guy are talking about what they're going to be doing. They're like they're hatching a plan, and Amy comes into the kitchen and they stop talking. Did this remind you of Fight Club at all?
The whole collective reminds me of Fight Club.
Yeah, you're right.
Like like even him with his little followers and whatever, and Kieren coming in and being like, "Dude, really?" You know, like all of it reminds me of Fight Club. I have a feeling if we look into a little bit of background on this, that's exactly what they're doing here.
Yeah, it could be. But yeah, so they stop talking when Amy comes into the kitchen and it's super awkward. But then they're not even really saying anything with detail. They're just like, I'm going to make Simon proud of me. Like, that was the thing they didn't say in front of Amy. Who the fuck cares, lady?
And Amy would probably just laugh.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, even she kind of makes fun of them. Like, she talks about how when Kieren walks into the meeting after it's already begun, she's like, oh, you're late for church.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, constantly joking Amy demeanor. So she also doesn't really take any of this seriously, and she's obviously not completely brainwashed, which we at the beginning of this season kind of feared that she was because she was spouting rhetoric.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting.
It's nice to see Amy being Amy.
Yeah, exactly. And then she also gets a weird nosebleed during this scene, or while Kieren is at the thing, which is exactly what that one kid had. Wasn't that one of his first symptoms when he took the blue Oblivion?
Yes, he did have a nosebleed.
Yeah, so I was a little worried that she was about to go rabid. And this episode also plays with our fears that rabid zombies might actually attack PDS people. Did you get that vibe today?
Yeah, I got that
in this
vibe.
episode? Yeah.
I did.
Yeah. Of course, that doesn't come into play until a little later, but yeah. So in the meantime, we are out back in the woods with Jem and Gary.
I have very mixed feelings about what they're doing with Jem, at least in this episode. And like, to me, the Jem of this season is really weird because she's regressed so far, and it doesn't. I mean, I know time has passed, but it just doesn't seem like she would do this stuff.
Yeah, she's obviously.
And by stuff, I mean Gary.
Exactly. Although we don't, I guess we do kind of think they're hooking up. I mean, they've been making out on screen. We haven't seen them doing it, thankfully. There's a couple of characters in this episode to me who look like zombies who are human. And Jem is one of them. She's always super pale. And Philip is the other. He's like ashen faced half the time. It's kind of like there are scenes where he's walking around town and I'm like, dude, he looks like a zombie. And she's kind of the same way.
Do you think they're doing it on purpose because it's these two characters that are very tormented?
I assume so, or it's just like Northern Englanders are pale. You can't tell. Be. Sun's never out.
As a very pale and albino person, I can commiserate with that. But
but yeah, so she's the one. Like, what I don't get about this scene is that she's like, let's split up to cover more ground. We can be done with our patrol in 15 minutes and then go to the pub or whatever. Right. And then she freaks out, sees Henry so persistently to the point where I'm like, oh, maybe he really wasn't burned and buried in different graves around the forest.
Yeah.
And then runs away from him until she runs into Gary.
Right.
Who's lucky she didn't shoot him.
Yes, he is. But it's okay because they just want to make out and drink beer.
And the beer's free again.
Mm-hmm. And on to one of the most awkward and awful parts of the episode. Kieren and Simon are walking along the street and making out again. They're on their way to Kieren's house for family lunch, Sunday lunch.
Were you not amazed that Simon agreed to put on makeup and contact lenses for this?
Well, this is the thing. This is part of what makes me not trust him. I just feel like he switched a little too quickly. Like, he's so rebellious. It just feels very manipulative to me.
That's a good point.
I mean, yeah, Kieren is super cute. I could totally see him being into Kieren, and, you couldn't blame him. Kieren's adorbs. But it just feels a little, like, especially when you see him being so, I don't know. So David Koresh about everything. um, it just doesn't totally match up with what I know of Simon. I mean, just in the last episode, he was yelling at Kieren for being like a sellout, pretty much. And then now he's putting on zombie makeup or real person makeup. So
Yeah.
it feels a little weird, but okay.
But it is really adorable though that Kieran's like tell my dad Steve that you like his jeans, and because they had that whole jeans dialogue in the previous episode. Like Steve is the comic relief in this season, and
he really is.
It's nice that they managed to keep that going.
Yeah, but before that, Amy sees Kieren and Simon making out, and I mean, it's obviously hurtful. She is very upset, and she doesn't confront them. She just kind of backs away. But
yeah, I mean, it was inevitable. They weren't falling over each other to fix this problem, and then they're kissing out in the street. What the fuck did they expect? Tiny town of Rorton.
And then they're on to tell Steve his jeans are nice.
And then they're going over to Kieran's for Sunday lunch. Sue has apparently made an excellent roast beef. And Simon's asking like how they met. Do you remember the story? Because they talked about it in the first season.
Yeah, the story is she was seeing a guy at university, and he dumped her, and she was
going to buy pills.
Yeah, but she was going to off herself.
Yeah.
And he talked her out of it, basically.
Yeah, that is awkward.
Little awkward.
Because it comes off really awkward. They're like, work. I met at work. And then Simon and Kieren are like, yeah, we met at work. And Simon's like, I really like the way he gave back. Which was funny because it's a horrible crime.
Yeah.
And it only gets more awkward from there.
Yeah, because Jem and Gary show up, and Gary, it's kind of, again, this is weird. I just can't see Jem sitting by and letting somebody talk to Kieren this way. She loves her brother. She showed that in the last season, and I just feel like this is a little bit weird.
She loves her brother, but she's super conflicted and needs Gary to feel normal. Because he's the only one who's going to be like, yeah, you shooting Henry
is okay.
Like that's all she has to go on right now, I think. And she sits by while Gary, in an almost unintelligible drunken northern, I don't know, Yorkshire something accent. Like, did you have some difficulty I was getting like one out of every 2 or 3 words.
Only Paul's still stuck in its head. It's me on way down. I lose my balance, don't I? Both feet end up in toilet bowl, boots wet, socks wet.
I understood it all, but I don't. I mean, basically, he was telling war stories but in like toilet humor, which made Steve very upset. And that's the thing. You're sitting there and you're listening to him tell his account of this war story with him and Jem, and that's the thing. They're talking about offing people like Kieren and Simon, and so they're just supposed to sit there and take it. I mean,
well, yeah,
this is the epitome of an awkward family meal when people have different political views or there's like a race issue.
And the thing is, Simon is the one who at the begin when Jem and Gary sit down, Simon's like, "Hey, we're gonna be cool, right, guys?"
Yeah, like in this situation,
of course, Gary and Jem are drunk, so there was no real good, contract there, I guess. But
I was actually a little surprised that Simon was that way, but and Gary just couldn't rein it in, and you know what? He just lit the fuse under Kieren, and Kieren went crazy.
He didn't go. I mean, he just delivers like a monologue and refuses to shut up, and kind of breaks down his parents' happy denial blanket that they've got going on, where like they all sit down to dinner together, and also talks about. I mean, honestly, his story about rising is a little trite. Like, it's in the middle of a thunderstorm and the clock's striking midnight. I don't know. It's very symbolic, and Simon then realizes that, yes, Kieren is the first risen. But doesn't it seem a little bit too contrived?
It does. I don't necessarily think he's the first risen. I think that we're meant to believe that he is still. It just feels a little too convenient. I think you're correct. And, it's a little overly dramatic, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Um,
but
yeah.
he's definitely correct or righteous when his dad is telling him to shut up, but never told Gary to shut up. Only tried to interrupt Gary and be like, "How do you like the roast beef?" And was never like, "Gary, shut the fuck up." Instead, he's telling his son that that's enough. Instead of this lout who's at their table, who was making out with his daughter at the front door.
Well, right. He does tell Gary to stop with the toilet humor, but that's as far as he goes. And Kieran's right to be outraged, and Kieran's right to walk out. And, I think you're right. It took the little comfort blanket away from the walkers, but I think maybe they needed it removed.
Yeah. So basically, Kieren and Simon go back somewhere, probably to Simon's place, and start the ritualistic taking off of the makeup and the contact lenses.
Which is really sensual and sexy.
If you say so.
Well, according to their reactions, it seems.
Yeah, there's a lot of just staring at each other, sort of like, this is weird, or I don't know, I'm so amazed. Yeah, you're right. And Maxine has come into some of the footage of Philip visiting the brothel and uses it to blackmail him to now lie to Henry's mother, which he basically kind of bows down. He's like, okay, whatever. And then there's the brothel. It was supposed to be a protest, but honestly, it's more of a raid.
It's totally a raid.
Yeah. And at the forefront of this raid are all the former members of the volunteer human security force. I forget what they were called, but now they're the Rorton Defense Service or something. And so Gary and Jem are both rousted out of their watching TV on the couch to go and partake. And they go in, they raid the building, they take all the Johns and the hookers out and line them up in front of the building to be publicly shamed. And Jem at least shows a little bit of like concern about what they're doing. I mean, I think she's okay with going after rabid zombies in the forest, but what she's doing now, I mean, it's obviously supposed to feel kind of fascist because it is. And she exhibits some misgivings about it, but she still goes through with it.
Right. And then, Amy walks along and sees this. She's been visiting the graveyard again, and she walks into the protest to some degree and then comes upon it right as Philip is coming up. And you kind of think, you don't know what he's going to do, but basically Philip takes the bullhorn from Maxine and gives a very rousing speech just about...
You feel like it was rousing? Or I felt like it was the dumbest speech I've ever heard.
But it was brave for Philip, and that's what you have to...
Yes,
that's what you have to...
He said what he was thinking, but it's like, do the right thing, because then you won't hate yourself so much. I don't know, like, I don't disagree with anything he said, but it was just...
I mean...
Not good speech writing, I guess. I don't know.
It's very much those who live in glass houses, that kind of thing. But
it doesn't go over very well, needless to say.
It doesn't, but then he's pretty brave and just goes and stands with the Johns and takes it.
Yeah.
So, and you can see Amy's face that she's kind of like, wow, I didn't know he had it in him.
And Maxine's face where she's like, you're an idiot, and you reap what you sow.
Yep. Yeah.
But yeah, so Philip starts off the episode kind of fantasizing about Amy and impressing her with his adeptness, and kind of finishes the episode proving to her, unwittingly, because he doesn't know she's there, that he's, not a bad guy.
Right. We also see a little mystery scene with Maxine, with the grave.
She goes to the graveyard too, and a grave we don't get to see, and says, "Don't worry, not long now." Who the fuck knows? I like again, more of this, like, not really explaining to us why we should be interested or care about what she's thinking or going through. Which, I don't know, like, this feels like a writing mistake on some.
Yeah, it's a little boring. But then you have the Amy and Philip scene at the bus stop, which, seriously,
Very, very cute, yeah.
it's pretty cute. Amy's pretending to be drunk because Philip actually is drunk.
He's pulling a gem and drinking a giant plastic bottle of cider.
And he's a little awkward, but he actually says what he thinks instead of being all fantasy and weird about it.
Yeah.
And Amy's kind of like laughing at him, and they actually do end up knocking boots. So go Philip.
In his tiny bed.
In his tiny bed.
So awkward.
I know. But it's a British show, Stuart. It has to be awkward.
Yes. And he makes a joke about how she might be biting his arm off in bed, and she accuses him of having a sense of humor, and it's still like adorable. Yeah. So yeah, we've replaced the love triangles of the last episode with some pairing up. You know, we've got Kieren and Simon, now we've got Amy and Philip, we've got Gary and Jem. However, the appearance of Henry still makes me think haven't completely gotten rid of that love triangle yet.
No. We've got Maxine in the gravestone.
Whatever the hell's going on there. Yeah. And the other thing that goes on that happens in this episode is the raid on the hospital by some of Simon's faithful. Maybe unbeknownst to him, we don't know really. They go and spray paint ULA on some of the walls and release the rabid zombies that were in the cage, which was Simon's original kind of design, although he had planned on taking them back to the bungalow and giving them medicine. These two just kind of let them go and then run away.
Right, and they took out the nurse that works there.
Yes. Well, all we heard was a scream, but we can assume that she is dead.
Yeah.
So there will be some sort of payback for this, or, you know, ramifications of this in the next episode, we should assume. Also, that Simon, at the very end of the episode, goes to a phone booth, and I guess we assume that he's calling the undead disciple, or prophet, or whatever he's called, and telling him, "I found the first risen, he's beautiful, you should see him," along those lines.
It's kind of creepy. Again, makes me doubt Simon's motives and everything he's doing in this episode, but okay.
I don't know. I'm not entirely persuaded that Simon isn't being sincere with Kieren.
Oh, I think part of him is, but there's definitely an ulterior motive.
Yeah. Either way, so that's episode 4, and it was a doozy.
It was.
Like, we could have probably lost some of the back and forth with Philip and the videotape stuff, because it eventually becomes a moot point. But everything else is kind of cool. So we've got 2 more episodes left this season. So next week we'll be talking about episode 5, and we'll see what happens with the fallout from the hospital raid. You know, Kieran's getting... well, he's obviously distanced himself from his family at this point, which was kind of his anchor into the community. We'll have to see where this is going.
Yes. So I'm excited. I can't wait to watch this. Have you been doing a sneak peek?
I saw... Well, come on. They show the coming attractions for the next episode is all I know. So I know that there's some stuff coming down the pipe, and I'm pretty excited about it. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay. I'll give that to you.
Yeah, and hopefully Jem and Gary break up, and she shoots him in the face.
Yeah, I'm hoping that too. Because he's awful. All right, well, that is this week's episode of Reanimated. Feel free to drop us a line if you like the episode, have other things you'd like to hear us review. We would love to hear from you. And that is reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com, or you can tweet at us at reanimatedpcast.
Awesome. So yeah, check us out next time, and from Reanimated Podcast for this week.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Music on this podcast is the song Pocket Zombie by Flex Vector, used with Creative Commons license.